Be on the stage? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. That was wonderful. Thank you. All right. So for anyone that's interested in speaking to our wonderful panel, I'm going to ask you if you can engage with them in the back in that dim area in the hall, just to be respectful of the speakers that are joining us on stage. That was a super interesting panel to hear all of the things that Polkadot is doing, the use cases, really creating value for the user. That was stated over and over again, and that's where we're going to see adoption. And then, of course, making it easier for the user to access this technology. And I think we all want to see scale at a faster rate. So I really enjoyed that panel. How about you guys? Did you enjoy the insights? All right, awesome. Well, we have 2 additional speakers joining us shortly. And before I bring them up, I just want to say, show of hands, because we want to make sure you guys are having a good time here at Proof of Talk. Show of hands, who actually enjoyed lunchtime between networking and food and drinks? Show of hands? Yes? 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 Okay, at least the majority. Some were like, But it's good to see that the majority enjoyed that time. That's really great feedback. Thank you. So up next, we're going to be talking about competitiveness in the stablecoin ecosystem, utility, yield, dynamics, and innovation. I would like to welcome to the stage Artem Senyakin from Oak Invest. Please come to the stage. And our second speaker in this wonderful fireside chat will be Guy Young of Ethena Labs. Welcome, Guy. Welcome, Artem. Round of applause, please.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here with us right now. This panel will talk about stablecoins, the stablecoin market, and we'll go a little bit more in detail about the inner works of Ethena, how it works, because your protocol is quite new. It has been live for a few months now, and it has sparked some discussion. So the idea would be to answer to some questions that people still might have. But to start off this panel, I would like to go over the stablecoin market as a whole. It's been quite the same for the last years. We had USDT, which was dominating everything. Then we had USDC in the second position. Then we had DAI and BUSD, which is now dead. We had Terra, the UST, which at some point came to the top, but then quickly fallen down. What is your opinion on the market itself? Do you think that there is some changes that need to be made, or do you think that there is some inner problems with this market right now?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for coming today, guys. Really excited to be here. Yeah, I think the stablecoin market, I think what we've learned over the last couple of years and coming out of like the last cycle, it's actually basically one of the only products within crypto generally, which I think has actually found proper product market fit around the world in terms of like non-speculative use cases. And if we just look at where the market's sort of standing now, it's around $160 billion in total stablecoin supply. And we've seen a real emergence of Tether as a dominant sort of actor within the market with roughly, depending on when you look, sort of between 70 to 80% of the market share. One interesting, I think, development that we saw since last cycle, and was obviously one of the more important things that sort of evolved in terms of like what was going on outside of crypto, was essentially risk-free rates in the real world going from 0 to 5%. And that had a very fundamental sort of change in terms of the stablecoin landscape, not only from like how these businesses actually make money, but actually how these businesses think and approach sort of customer acquisition. So it's obviously a very big deal now that you have an ability to actually share that yield if the issuer decides to do so with users. And I think it's an extremely powerful product to be able to give anyone in the world access to $1 with a yield. It's potentially one of the most powerful saving instruments that actually exist. And so I think with that emergence, you've actually seen a split in the market in terms of both a different type of risk preference that you can express as a user in terms of Do you want to go with something that's lower yielding, more sort of battle tested, and has a stronger brand through many cycles? But then we've also seen the emergence of treasury-backed stablecoins, which are sort of sharing the yield with users on chain at something that looks a bit safer at sort of a 4 to 5.5% yield. And then Athena's really sitting on the opposite end of that spectrum, which is a totally different design, construction, and the way that it's actually trying to generate economic return. And the yield is much higher. So I'm not here sort of saying one is better or worse. All the observation that we've had is users want to be able to express a different risk preference in the same way that you get different levels of yield on different fixed income instruments in the real world. And that's really the difference that we've seen this cycle, which is on a dollar instrument now, you can pick where you sit on that spectrum between liquidity at 0 yield, treasuries at 5, and then sort of Ethena that's sitting usually above that level of return.
Yeah, so basically we can differentiate the two main topics in the stablecoins is basically the risk you are willing to take and the yield you are willing to make, right? If we base it on what you've said.
Yeah, sure. And I also think categorizing something as risky or not risky is probably also a mischaracterization, because I think a core piece of what we're trying to do with Ethena, and maybe just taking one step back and discussing how the actual backing to the collateral works, is instead of holding a US Treasury sitting behind a receipt token for a normal stablecoin, we're using crypto collateral and derivatives within crypto to achieve a stable piece of collateral. There are different financial risks that exist with Ethena, and that definitely do not exist with normal stablecoins. But actually, it's kind of the point of what we're trying to do here, which is we want to try and make our own form of dollar money within crypto, i.e. a dollar that's disconnected from the existing system. We think that's a fundamentally important product that should exist within crypto. And yes, it has different types of risks, but it is uncorrelated to the type of risk that you see with a normal stablecoin. As we sort of learned with SVB at the beginning of 2023, there are real custodial risks to having T-bills sitting within banks. And what we're trying to provide is just something that's uncorrelated and different, and not sort of taking an opinion if it's sort of outright more risky or not.
I think that most of the people in the crypto market have kind of PTSD with what happened with Luna and UST when it depegged and basically went to zero. You're not an algorithmic stablecoin. You are using some strategies that are currently used in the TradFi market. So basically the question that I had is, why has no one done it before, and how did you come up to this strategy with Ethena?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a disappointing answer, but people have tried it before, and it wasn't actually my idea in the beginning. So we saw 2 different projects try to do the same thing, all living on-chain in a decentralized way in 2021. They were called UXD on Solana, and then there was one called Lemma on Ethereum. The very basic synopsis around what happened there was there was just not enough derivative open interest that sits on-chain in order to sustain a product like this into the sort of scale that we've grown with Ethena. And the decision that sort of we made as a team was, yes, we were going to make trade-offs in terms of decentralization. In order to access scale, we needed to get into centralized exchange liquidity, which is in north of $30 billion right now in terms of BTC and ETH open interest on the derivative market. While you look on chain, it's sort of like less than $1 billion in total altogether. So really, that was just the key bit was a difference in approach, which it was just an explicit trade-off that we made, and wanted to be honest with our users to explain the reason why we did that. But it was really just choosing scale over all of the other sort of trade-offs that you could be making. And then in terms of the actual genesis of the idea itself, again, this wasn't my idea. It was actually Arthur Hayes who came out with an article in the beginning of 2023. It was called Dust and Crust, and I encourage everyone to have a read of it if you haven't already. And he sort of outlined in that piece his vision and how he sort of saw this as the best sort of construction of how we can think about our own form of native money. His original idea was starting with a long BTC position and then a short perpetual offsetting against that. And we sort of adjusted it in the beginning to be using staked ETH, Bitcoin, and then we sort of expand to different assets after that. But yeah, that was really the inspiration and the genesis behind Ethena. And he sort of called out in that piece, if there was a team that wanted to go build it, he would sort of back that and push it forward. And that's sort of what we did, yeah.
You touched on a little bit on the decentralization there, and basically for every stablecoin we have this trilemma, just as we have with the blockchains, But for the stablecoin trilemma, we have the decentralization, the stability, and the capital efficiency for each stablecoin that is created and that is available on the market. Which part of this trilemma do you think you respond to the best, and which part do you think you have put aside for the moment in order to achieve where you are right now?
Yeah, I think it probably don't even need to ask my opinion. We can kind of see the way that the market has actually responded to things. I think the piece of those three that the market cares about the least is decentralization. Basically, no stablecoins are actually decentralized. There's maybe one that can make a claim to being one. It's called Liquidity, LUSD. The market cap's around $100 million, and Tether's sitting at 80 billion. So it's not me sort of making that claim. It's actually just the market saying, we don't care about that quality as much as we do about other things, and it's not my job to try and push onto people what I think they should be liking. It's just to observe what they do like and sort of build for that. And then I think with reference to the other two, it's interesting, I think, like when we talk about stability with stablecoins, and I think stablecoins are just an awful name, actually, in general, for us to sort of be describing these products. It's an impossibly high standard, actually, for anything to maintain a dollar market price on an open market that can trade freely. We've seen Tether and USDC depeg significantly in the past. It doesn't mean it wasn't backed. It just meant the market sort of panicked at a moment, and the price deviated from where it should have been. And so I think we as an industry actually need to think about if that's actually the right name for these things, because it's impossible that any asset is going to be exactly one forever in time, and there are always going to be panics in the market. So I think the stability piece is important insofar as it's always collateralized and you haven't sort of lost the collateral that's sitting behind it and it's become under-collateralized. And then I think liquidity or capital efficiency is probably the one that people care about the most. And I think it's a pretty interesting sort of thought process, which is why is it, despite the fact that you can generate 5% yield now holding treasuries or other RWAs on chain, why is it that Tether and USDC are actually getting more dominant than they were a year ago? Like Tether's market share is going up rather than down without sharing a dollar of that interest. And the reason for that is because people care more about liquidity than they do about a small interest rate, because when crypto is moving 5, 10% on the day, you don't really give a fuck about 5% a year on your stable. You care about being able to buy the dip at size and make 5% a day when you're in the right position to do that with Tether on an exchange. And so I think it's a bit of a misnomer in the way that people think we're going to put 5% on a stable and we're going to take all of Tether's market share. The real thing that people are after with stables, and this is like the genesis of why they were actually created in the beginning, was just to sit as you're trading in and out of volatile crypto assets. And that's really the value is, are they liquid? Are they in the right places for people to be trading in and out of? And that's where you start to create a real moat around your business, which is what Tether's actually achieved.
I think that you have two types of view now, because on the one hand, you're right in the sense that people know that they can achieve a better volatility and a better return by basically trading on and off some assets, either Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever altcoin they want, and they can achieve a better yield than 5% per year, obviously, especially in the market that we have right now, where prices can jump as high as 10 to 20% per coin in an hour basis, and you can make profit out of it. But I think the other side of crypto also cares about the yield, and they tend to go towards the highest yields on the market. And I think that's also one of the reasons why Ethena is now at 3.5 billion valuation, market cap, sorry. And so the thing is, you started off by offering this yield through funding and Ethereum staking, by providing LSTs on your protocol, which are able to offer you 3 to 5% yield yearly from the staked ETH, and then all else comes from the funding. Now, if we look, so I went on the protocol yesterday just to look at the numbers and to see which are the collaterals that compose the USDE backing. And right now, you only have 12% of LSTs, so staked ETH, which actually earns 3 to 4% yield per year. And when people talked about funding going negative once USDE was released, you said that this negative funding would be counterbalanced by this yield from LSTs. Now, when these LSTs compose less than 20%, would you be able to respond to negative funding?
Yeah, sure. I think just to give some context around how the numbers looked, I think when we're designing the product and how it sort of like shifted through time. When we were first putting the product together, staked ETH yields were around 6%, and funding was somewhere between, call it 6 to 8%. So you're getting paid on your collateral roughly 6, and then the hedges on the other side were paying you roughly the same amount. As the cycle sort of progresses and the demand for leverage increases within the system, perp funding obviously dramatically expands from that 6 to 8 sort of region. We've seen it at 30, 40, 50, 60% in periods in the last 6 months. And then what we've also observed is in the last year, staked ETH returns for a multitude of different reasons have declined significantly from that 6% that I described to something that's closer to 3% now. So something that sort of looked pretty comparable in the beginning, which was like 6 on both sides, to something that now looks like 3% on one side and 20 to 30 on the other. The facts changed basically between when we created the product and the world as it exists today. And I think you can't sort of be like firm in the way that you've done these things in the beginning. And when the facts change, you should reconsider whether it makes sense to sort of change your mind. And so I think where we've got to now is that in a bull market, generally the funding is so much more extreme than you would capture on the yields for staked ETH, that the additional duration and liquidity risk that you're introducing with that type of collateral versus Bitcoin or ETH, there's a question mark around whether you're actually getting paid the appropriate interest rate for 3% on stETH. I personally am not that interested at 3% on stETH relative to the risk that it sort of like includes now. And so we're in the process of basically minimizing that contribution to the Ethena sort of backing at this moment in time. Having said that, Ethena is going to be quite responsive to the cycle. So when things are going up and like it's hot, Ethena is going to go quickly, as you've sort of seen in the last few months. And when the market cools down, it's going to be also one of the stable assets that I think is going to lose the most size at the fastest speed. And that's okay. That's how it's been designed. It's supposed to be responding to the market in that way. But as it sort of unwinds, the percentage of LSTs that sit there are going to become a larger percentage of the Ethena backing as it sort of gets smaller through the cycle. And in that moment, you're sort of being able to cover for more of those risks that you're describing as you're sort of needing it, and Athena's getting smaller on the other side. One of the pieces which I've probably been pretty poor in terms of explaining how Ethena works and can sort of respond to that market condition at sort of the end of the cycle is you can always close the positions. So when the market starts to turn, funding sort of dips, and prices are going down, you always have the flexibility to just move from a long ETH, short ETH position to just sit in USDC or Tether. And then there's a question mark whether in that period of time you maybe want to explore like an RWA strategy for those very specific moments in time that it sort of calls for it. So yeah, I think that's sort of the general approach, which is you have an ability to just get out of everything that we're doing if the market does sort of turn in that direction. And as sort of Ethena gets smaller, the percentage of LSTs gets larger as it does unwind to sort of cover for that piece as well.
Okay, so basically it's up to the users to react in case the market turns, and if they want to exit, then it's there. That's what they should be doing at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a very strong believer that every time you try and get in the way of a market force and try and obstruct it in any way, you're actually just causing bigger problems that are going to break in bigger ways further down the line. And so Athena's really, it's a market set interest rate around the funding. When funding's high, it's attractive. People come into the product. When it's low, they want to leave the product. And we never want to stand in front of those flows. All we're providing is the infrastructure for people to come and access it and get out of it when they want to. And I think if you ever try and step in front of that, it becomes quite a dangerous game.
Okay. We have not much time left, but I have 2 more questions to go through. So let's go back to this yield. So right now the yields are high because not many USDE is staked. Because right now people are farming the airdrop, they are trying to get the points to get more ENA afterwards. So, but if more people stake it afterwards, then the yields might come down. And so the idea would be for me to see if you have any additional path for additional revenue, either create your own chain, partner with exchanges, do something that can sustain this high yield in order to maximize people staying in your stablecoins. Do you have any plans for this scenario?
Yeah, I think one interesting observation that we've had is, if anyone's familiar with MakerDAO and DAI and SDAI, you've only got roughly 25% of DAI that's actually sitting in SDAI, which is the same sort of construction that we have between USD and SUSD. And what's interesting about that is that there is always some amount of unstaked dollars which are being used in a productive way, whether it's sitting in AMMs, whether it's sitting in order books on exchanges or wherever it is. And so you do see this sort of like consistent percentage which is non-staked, and you can actually be using that to sort of like subsidize the other side. I think one piece that you're touching on there, and it's something that we put out in our roadmap on the Ethena Twitter and on mine, is yes, we are going to go build a chain around Ethena and USDE as the core asset. And the idea here is really just building financial applications with USDE as the lifeblood and the core asset to actually power those applications. And to the extent that, well, the more successful you can be in actually building an ecosystem around the asset, it affords you a greater ability to sort of to capture those yields that you were describing. Again, I just want to make sure everyone's clear. The yields coming down are not like a negative thing around Ethena. It is quite literally the point of why Ethena exists, is we've identified that this yield is too high relative to the risk, in our opinion, and you need more capital to come in and push that interest rate down. And in the process of doing so, we think people will capture a lot of value. And that's sort of why Ethena is there to exist, which is bring that interest rate down to a level that we think makes more sense.
Perfect. And just to close this panel, I have this tweet from you that you tweeted a few weeks ago, which said, "It is not enough that USDE wins alone, we must rug the dollar together." So what is the meaning behind this tweet? What have you had in mind when you said that?
I wish I had a good answer to that. It was more, I think, getting to the idea, which I sort of touched on earlier, which is, I mean, the whole point of crypto is we're trying to build like a system that exists outside of the existing one. And the most important asset that we have within crypto is sitting with bonds in the US banking system. And so I think there is some argument to make that pretty much everything we're doing in DeFi is completely pointless if it's all running on centralized dollars. And all that was sort of just a point that we're trying to make, that like creating our own form of money is an important thing to sort of work towards. And whether it's us who succeeds or someone else, we just sort of want to see someone do it.
Okay, because it reminded me the tweet from Doc One, which said, "By my hands, the DAI will die." Yeah. And so this is why I also wanted to ask this question, just to get your opinion on that. I think we're out of time. I don't think we have time for questions. No. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for all of you who listen, and see you around.
I know, you're good. Thank you to our two speakers. That was a really enlightening